It's 10 o'clock, so let's get started. Good morning. How y'all doing? I am not from here. Can you tell? I am from Austin, Texas, but I spend a lot of time in South Carolina, and my voice changes when I stay there. One of the clients there, the head of law enforcement division, I was introducing him to the team, and we had Achuth, and we had Vikram, and I'm Mike. He goes, I don't know why they brought you. You talk right. I was a little disturbed, but then everybody laughed, and so it was all okay. So I'll try and talk normal for the presentation today. My name is Mike Wyatt. I'm a director with Deloitte, and I focus on cyber risk services for state public sector. What's that mean? I get called when a state has a breach, basically. And so I don't want to serve the state of South Carolina. I don't want to serve California in the way that I've served South Carolina and Utah, right? So we handle the post-breach response for both those states. And so now, after lessons learned from there, I want to focus on preventative measures and things that we can do to not be a state where the governor has to come out and apologize for something happening, right? So today, I want to talk about critical infrastructure and eligibility systems. You know, I talk to people about breaches, right? And it is in the news every day. How many people have had credit monitoring, free credit monitoring for something, right? How about multiple offers of free credit monitoring? Your university, your employer, your healthcare provider. It's all too common, and people kind of get used to it. It's just, you know, it's not that big a deal, right? You got a $50 limit on your credit card. It doesn't impact us in the same way that attacks that we're going to talk about today can affect us. Traditionally, cyber attacks have focused on a financial aspect, right? And it was low-hanging fruit for a long time. You know, I could go round up a bunch of credit cards and run money across it and monetize it. I could actually sell credit cards for $4 to $5 a piece. It helps if you speak Russian or Ukrainian. With money-back guarantees. And then we've seen a change, right? In the last few years, we've seen a change from a financial focus to more nefarious activities. Organized crime is very active in cybercrime now. And people ask me, well, you know, why not stick with drug trafficking? That's, you know, a lot of money in drug trafficking. There's more in cybercrime. And, you know, there are really a couple of reasons why organized crime has focused on cyber, right? One is, you know, you don't get shot, right? So life expectancy is better, right? Because it's an anonymous activity. It's very easy to hide the activities, and frankly, because of that, you don't get caught. So organized crime has moved very rapidly into this area, and then the other side is nation state, right? So there's a lot of nation state activity, and a lot of the things we'll cover today directly tie back to other nations wanting to understand how our control systems work and how they can disrupt those systems. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So, cyber landscape is changing. It's changing for IT systems. It's also changing for industrial control systems. Right? There's a lot of things that have changed in this particular area. We'll talk about cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. And then what can we do about them? Because I'll tell you, operational technology, which is an analog to information technology, the operational technology for SCADA systems and industrial control systems is way behind, right? It's where IT was, 15, 20 years ago. Because before being connected to the internet, they're air-walled off, they're proprietary, there weren't that many people that knew how they worked, not that much interest in them. You could find the plans and the information on websites. People would publish it. How's this system work? You could find it very readily available, not treated as restricted, confidential information that need to be protected. All right. And so with all this, it's a little bit of gloom and doom, but we're going to make sure we end on a high note. There is hope. There is hope. We don't need to be completely depressed and concerned that all is lost in the critical infrastructure space. After this session, there's a session by FireEye Mandiant in 319 that's going to go in a lot more technical detail about use of tools to help manage risk in industrial control system settings. This session is going to be a little bit higher level. I want to thank the publishers of USA Today. Did you read USA Today? Now, I'm not saying this was a cyber attack, but you can connect the dots and see how this is a hypothetical scenario. Danger under our streets, right? There's a blast in New York's East Harlem back in March because of a gas main blowing. These systems are controlled by computers connected to the internet. If you think about changing the pressure settings on a valve or overriding an alert, you could actually cause this type of thing to happen. And it's not that hard to contemplate it as a possibility. So let's hope that doesn't happen. I know California's had some experience with gas lines. It's a legitimate and real concern. And I tell you, that's a lot worse situation than needing credit monitoring for a year, right? Okay, landscape. So what is true for OT, operational technology, is true for IT and vice versa. They're very sophisticated attacks, and there's not only profit motive, but political motives now, right, and political activism. It's interesting. We actually have mapped out types of attacks by industry and by sector, and for industrial control systems and so forth, these are the big three. It doesn't help that we keep hooking everything up to the internet. The internet was not designed for security. It was designed to share information. It was cooked up by folks in universities, not really thinking about security at the forefront when these systems were designed. So we had to bolt on security over time. And while we're catching up in a lot of areas, right, as we add new systems that, again, not traditionally connected to the internet, security continues to be a bolt-on afterthought, usually after something bad's happened. I'm aware of an automobile manufacturer. They've got IP in their car, and we're like, have you done a risk assessment on that? Because, it'd be really bad if somebody was able to take over the car, and they're, no, it's secure. It's completely secure. 27 minutes had control of that car, right? Just to kind of prove the point. We have some really smart folks that can do that kind of thing. So it's different now. How many people nest thermostats? I've got Nest thermostats. I worry about it. Connected to the internet, people have access to that information if they wanted to. So the designers of these systems, medical devices, same kind of situation, they're now beginning to realize that as we build these systems, we have to do it from a systems engineering perspective and build security in. Great for the next generation, not real good for now. We got to figure out how to deal with the fact that a lot of this stuff is not particularly secure. A lot of reaction, right? When bad things happen, the government's here to help. Let's write some new regulations and standards. The NERC and FERC folks have come out with critical infrastructure protections that's changing much faster than organizations have the ability to implement those changes, right? There are cost cycles involved. There's money cycles involved, right? Legislative appropriations. So a lot of activity in this area where there are good intentions to help the situation, but it's really hard to keep up. How do you know what to do? You got limited funds. Where do you put them to try to help mitigate risks? And I've already talked about this. Supervisory control, data acquisition, SCADA, and industrial control system hacking. We're seeing it across a variety of sectors. All right, so other trends. And I promise we're not going to leave you on a downer. Let's get through the facts first. A lot of focus on non-IT systems. We're seeing a growing increase as we look and go through threat analytics to see where the attacks are occurring and what's being targeted. Significant increase in this particular area. Right. And of course, those of you who are familiar, we already know that it was an HVAC contractor that access was moved over to the credit card side. So we should have been here all off, but it wasn't. Taxed by employees, contractors, and third parties. So a lot of these systems, the notion of principle of least privilege is completely foreign. completely foreign. Usually there's one account and it's shared, and oftentimes it's going to be default passwords, right? Matter of fact, some of the systems have the password embedded in the chip, and so that's really tough to do a password reset on that. But as often as not, there's just no processes in place to manage those ITIL standard things like change management, changing default passwords. So employees, accidental or intentional issues, contractors and third parties. You know, it's interesting. We're getting better about managing employee access, but third parties, still pretty sketchy. Still a lot of work to be done in third-party risk management. Connected systems, you know, we connect everything up together because it's convenient and everything needs to be connected to the internet. Many of these systems used to be completely separate, air-rolled off. The threat surface was a lot smaller. There just weren't that many people that had access to it. I started my career at Burlington Northern Railroad, and we used all kinds of control systems to change signals on tracks, and you know, you think about that, right? Being able to stop a train, positive train control, so if an engineer had some sort of adverse event, we could actually stop the train. You can kind of think about if a nefarious act can control this environment, what that might mean. It's very, very significant. Flat networks. We've really gotten used to designing an architecture for efficiency of moving packets around, not very good for security, right? And that applies with these industrial control systems environments as well. Spend a lot of time having our client environments very, very flat, and it's very easy to hop over to the server environments. So the principles of secure enclaves, creating secure enclaves for our IT systems, we need to think about that same kind of thinking for industrial control systems. And certainly let's keep the payment card system separate from, you know, the air conditioning systems and other control systems. Just a little tip there. All right, now we're on devices. I was speaking at a security conference with the Chief Information Security Officer for the Federal Reserve System, and the marketing team for this event wanted to give away USB key fobs with presentations. And it was like, no, but heck no. We're not going to give away USBs at a security conference because that's one of the, still today, top attack vector. You know, these get picked up, the device gets connected, malware proliferates. Bring your own devices to help. I'll touch control over these things. And so the IT system vulnerabilities are still impacting the OT side of the house. And Russell Jones, he's our cyber risk leader for public sector here. He's also very active in the medical device security area. Big concerns here as well. All right. So again, moving from things that affected our pocketbook or were an inconvenience to things that have human consequences. All right. I want to go through some scenarios, right? And you know, I know, given this audience, we're going to have some debate over how realistic the scenarios are. But we just kind of want to take you through what would it be like if, for a couple of different environments. Water treatment. That's the one to stay away from, right? If something happened with a water treatment system, that could take weeks, months to recover from, depending on the nature of the situation, right? Amber alert. The signs on the roadways that can be controlled, the messaging comes out on the phone. And then benefit systems, right? So people that that need public assistance to get food or medical attention. What happens if these systems get compromised? So let's just take a look at some of these. So the first one we're going through is an attack on a water treatment plant.
Gets a call from someone saying the tap water burned her while she was brushing her teeth. It's the first call of many. A plant operator discovers sodium hydroxide dosage levels are dangerously high, and they have been for more than 24 hours. He can't get into the SCADA control system. The plant has been hacked. Leadership makes the call to halt treatment options. 500,000 customers are affected. The site engineering team says the plant will be down for at least 4 days. And the reporter gets a tip about the cyber attack. A story airs on local news and details are wrong. Phone calls, emails, and social media posts flood mayor's offices, Department of Water Resources, and governor's office. Stores run out of bottled water, and pictures of empty shelves are on the evening news. Leadership finally calls in investigators, but it's been 24 hours, and critical evidence has been lost. The cyber attack is now national news, and rumors are reported as fact. The governor's office is swamped with calls, emails, and social media attacks. Homeland Security and FBI call. They want answers.
Well, that's a sobering vignette, isn't it? So is it realistic? When we were going through this, I was like, that's frightening, but would that really happen? Is that something that's in the realm of possibilities? Well, let's look at some headlines.
Is this recent? No, it's not recent. 2006. It's been an issue for a while. It's been an issue for a while. The sodium hydroxide is actually a chemical added to water to adjust the acidity. And there was this, we don't know the background and history on this, but we do know that this scenario happened and people were injured. Okay. So,
In Houston, remember I talked about passwords? Right? How about a 3-character password? How's that for protection? We're open for business. Come on in. That's basically what that says. So, this is a very real possibility, right? This kind of scenario with the water treatment plant. And again, I think in some ways it can be more disruptive than power, at least in the near term, because the potential impact. There are power outages. That's a scenario that many communities know how to deal with. Maybe not perfectly well, but certainly this is a different type of situation. Okay? And at least with 2 of these attacks were malicious, right? Insider threat or external. A lot of news coverage. One of the things that we have to deal with in government that's a little different than private sector, I'm aware of a lot of bad things that have happened that people don't know about. There may be an SEC disclosure that is very high level, but doesn't get into the specifics. When it's a governmental agency and the need to be transparent with the constituents, everything is fair game. And also, guess what? It becomes very, very political. Anybody remember the OSI model? We don't talk about a lot. A few people, right? There's 1 through 7. There's actually not 1 through 7. There's 8 and 9. Religion and politics, right? And that top layer is one that determines success or failure of systems. Well, in here, what we've seen, right, in South Carolina, where I spent the last year and a half helping recover from a breach that affected 80% of the citizens, tax records going back 10 years, taking through cyber attack, is that there are material issues about improving the security posture and so forth, but there are a lot of political issues, right, that the administration's had to deal with. And it's been a huge distraction from the mission that the agencies of the state need to conduct, because now they have to focus on security, right? So wouldn't it be better to think through this and plan for risk management and risk mitigation rather than waiting for something to happen? All right, let's take a look at another scenario. Amber Alert.
Highways are packed, and a strange message appears on the digital signs around I-80 and its interchanges. Then, smartphone phones buzz with an emergency alert. The 911 system is overwhelmed with calls as an epic traffic jam clogs the major interchanges near the Bay Bridge. The messages came from the state's Amber Alert system. The IT team discovers that hackers used a spear phishing attack to place malware on a coordinator's state-issued laptop. The passwords have been changed. Leadership decides to physically shut down all digital road signs. The governor's office is overwhelmed with calls and emails, including from Homeland Security and the FBI. The traffic jam swallows the interstate, the interchanges, state roads, and even local neighborhoods. Ambulances throughout the Bay Area are paralyzed by traffic, and critically ill patients can't get to the hospital. The story hits local news. The governor gets calls to hold an emergency briefing, and she needs detailed information right now.
All right, another scenario. Is that realistic? Has this ever happened? I'll tell you, I had the opportunity to have a deputy assistant director for the U.S. Human Services present, and actually showed a video of a young man who now works for us taking over the road signs using a smartphone and some malware. Pretty frightening, but quite realistic. So we have hackers issuing bogus Amber Alerts and zombies. This actually has happened in multiple cities where the signs have been taken over because they're so well protected, right? It's pretty easy to get into these systems, take them over, and cause a lot of disruption during rush hour. So I know this has happened in a East Coast state. It's happened in Austin, Texas. It's happened in either Seattle or Washington on the Pacific Northwest. All right. So if you think about the implications, yes, some people do this for fun, right? Some people may, but the implications of this kind of situation can have life-altering consequences. Okay. One more scenario. So this has been critical infrastructure, but benefit systems are also really critical infrastructure. They don't have SCADA systems that control them, but they affect people's lives because when they don't work, it affects the ability to receive services. All right. So let's go through one more.
A field office for the primary benefits system files a trouble ticket. They're locked out of the online system. Neither local nor statewide IT can help. People who didn't receive their benefits on time can't get online and find out why. They start dialing the call center. After many rounds of messages, Central IT finally gets back to the departments, but they don't have any answers. Benefit recipients take to social media to share their displeasure. Local people sniff out the story. They get no comment from the department. Internally, IT confirms there was a spear phishing attack, and it's highly likely that sensitive data was taken. The department reluctantly admits it was hacked, but says only a few thousand records were compromised.
Maybe.
The national media runs stories about what they're calling a crisis. Then, the hacktivist group, Pandora, claims responsibility for the attack. We got millions of migrants who were popped up. Benefit recipients start arriving at offices in person, including the governor's office. They demand answers.
All right. Let's take a look. Well, the target hack actually affected 10 people, right? Why is that? Well, because in order to mitigate the risk of fraud,
a service provider turned off those cards. The unintended consequence was it not being health department, right? So these systems are under attack. You know, I had a state client ask me, you know, why are you so worried about states? You know, I understand Wells Fargo, I understand Bank of America, but why, you know, this is a small state. Why not? Why would anybody care about that? It's like, why does Willie Sutton rob banks? Right? Because that's where the money is. Birth records, death records, health records, all that can be monetized for $20 to $25 a record, money back guarantee. Again, speaking Russian helps, right, for other foreign languages. States are absolutely under attack. Now, also, there's been a lot less money to put towards defensive mechanisms compared to the private sector, right? So, do you try to break into the car that has the doors locked or the one that doesn't, right? So, states now are ever increasing, feeling the burden of the New World Order of cyber attacks. Okay? So, with all of that, what can we do? What can we do? Certainly, you take the entire IT budget and spend it on information security and still not guarantee that these things will never happen. I actually had a leader in the state of Utah after we were selected to help, after their incident was made public, and said, Mike, I just want one thing from you. I want you to guarantee this will never happen again. That's, I very humbly replied, I cannot guarantee that. What we can commit is that we go through this process, we can reduce the risk of a situation occurring, and if something were to, and I didn't say when, I said that, you'd be able to contain it much more. Right? All right, so what's that mean? What's that mean? Fundamentally, I think we have to move to an enterprise risk management model for dealing with the world we live in. Right? The old model of, we're going to build a fort, and we're going to add some extra fortifications to the wall, and we're going to dig a moat, and we're going to add more fortifications. It just doesn't fly. The world is too Swiss cheese now, right? We've got integrated supply chains, we've got connectivity with the customers, with the vendors. You just can't build all those walls and just tear gap everything and prevent everything from happening. So what you do need to do is understand what needs to be protected. I can't tell you how many organizations I've dealt with over the last couple of years that don't even have an asset inventory. They don't even know what systems that they have and which ones have sensitive data that need to be protected. They're focused on the firewalls and endpoint protection. Those are important, necessary, but not sufficient. Organizations really haven't thought about who's actually coming after them. Who would have an interest, right? Who do you need to focus on preventing, and what scenarios might they use? A lot of information available now. A lot of sources of information to help us think through this particular question. Security information event monitoring, right? SIM. Dr. Eric Hall of SANS, he's got a great saying. Prevention is important. Detection and containment are critical. And that's absolutely true. It's like staying healthy, right? I'm going to eat right, get enough sleep, take my vitamins, but I'm going to get sick. The key is to have the defensive mechanisms to catch it, contain it, and get well quickly. I think a biological model is a better model than the traditional, fortress model that we've used in the past. So you have to be able to detect when things are occurring in the environment to be able to react to them, right? And I mentioned this already. Do we know where the things that we care about are? This is a Deloitte set of terms that we use now, but I actually like it, right? So security is important. We need to have privileged user management. We need to have good processes. A lot of this doesn't cost anything. Changing default passwords on devices is very, very basic stuff. But I tell you, if I do vulnerability assessments, I will find default passwords on devices, on network devices, almost without exception, almost every time. And the ones that don't, they have good ITIL processes, right? Good change management, good decommissioning processes for devices when they're no longer needed. good identity management hygiene. Vigilant. So, let's face it, let's just admit, some of that's going to happen. But like Stephen Covey, I make a fan of Stephen Covey. All new hires that come through that I talk to, I tell them, you go read 7 habits. Habit number 1, right, is between stimulus and response, there's an opportunity to make a decision, how to react. And in here, paying attention to what's happening in the environment, right? It's not necessarily that something bad happened, it's how you react to it. If you look, I mean, this is really true with the state government. If you look at what happens, a lot of times the crisis could have been much better contained. They just had a plan on what to do and what to say and who to talk to and when to talk to them when something happens. If they just said, you know what, we're probably going to have a cyber breach. So let's plan for it. Let's do some, you know, some threat wargaming or scenario planning, and then let's make sure everybody knows who to call and what to do when it happens. Right? So when does the governor have to talk to the person? And when do the lawyers get involved? And when does the public information officer get involved? And what are the roles? And what's the communication protocol? If that's figured out before something bad happens, the impact to the constituents and the reaction from the General Assembly or the legislature will be much better than if it's figuring it out on the go. And I think this has happened enough where this should be pretty obvious, right? And then resilience. So, something bad's happened, we've detected it, how are we going to respond and contain and recover? And I again, you know, Aaron Cole, right? So, security is important, these two are absolutely critical. And these are areas where, especially in the incident response side, I see so many mistakes made. Where something's happened, there's been some kind of issue, right? Malware, cyber attack, whatever it may be. And the response is so poor that evidence gets damaged. And so then it's really hard to know what actually happened. I have a client that actually reported something much worse to the media because they misunderstood what happened. They didn't have the technical skills to do the forensics and incident response and analysis to say that, you know, it looks like this happened. And instead they said, this happened, and it was a much more expensive and politically damaging situation, right? So, with a limited budget, limited dollars, where do we spend? Well, risk assessments, understanding what you have, asset inventory, privileged user management, there are key areas from a secure perspective. Being able to detect when things are happening in the environment, including zero-day attacks. Being able to understand that my normal traffic pattern is this, and now it's this. I need to investigate that, right? And then how do I respond? So the incident response capability and the recovery processes. And there's a lot to be learned from disaster recovery and business continuity that can be applied to crisis management, right? So those are just some initial thoughts. And again, a lot of these don't cost significant dollars to go and implement. I mean, good hygiene regarding application development and change control and ITIL processes, you know, those are available if somebody just is assigned to do it and there's commitment to move forward with that. There are some good resources for those who have to deal with control systems and SCADA systems because the players that provide technical controls and assistance in these areas are different, right? So there are typical IT companies that provide security solutions. There's a whole different set. You may not know that GE now has capabilities to do assessments in SCADA, right? They actually sell software. There's a product called World Tech, WURLD-TECH. They acquired that company recently. Lockheed Martin has acquired Industrial Defender, right? So there's a different set of players, and they're typically the same ones that have built these systems, right? They're realizing they're behind the 8 ball now. They're going to be held accountable when bad things happen if there are a lot of vulnerabilities in those systems. So they're putting in compensating control solutions in those areas. From a resource perspective, and I had a slide on this morning, but PowerPoint didn't cooperate, so we don't have it now, but I'll just share a few with you. Forrester, February 18, 2014, security risk, it says SNR, security risk pros can no longer ignore threats to critical infrastructure. It's a good piece. Kyle Wilhoit is a researcher at Trend Micro, and he had a great study where he set up a honeypot for Black Hat Europe in 2013, and he actually got a programmable logic controller and some other pieces set up so it looked like a water treatment system. And then he made sure it would hit on the Google searches pretty high up, and then just waited, right? How long is it going to take for this to be hit and attacked? 18 hours. So 18 hours from it being put up, it was being hit. And so there were, in 1 month, there were 23 attacks, 13 of which were sustained attacks by common actors. And they were able to get a hold of the controller and change fan speeds. So if this had been a real attack, it could have actually done some damage. And so it's fascinating write-up, a lot of good resources on that. It's called Who's Really Attacking Your ICS Equipment? Here in Micro 2013. There's a pretty good review of technologies that are available for control systems. Gartner, December 16, 2013, came out with the 2014 landscape. It's called Competitive Landscape Critical Infrastructure Protection Worldwide. Okay. I mentioned earlier in room 319, FireEye is doing a session on SCADA and ICS, and they're going to go in quite a bit more technical detail in this session, so I invite you to attend that. With that, I'd just like to open this up for any questions, feedback, other than the annoying phone ringing. I already got that internally. Maybe we shouldn't have the phone ringing, but questions, thoughts on this? Anything surprising? Or were you all, did you guys have situational awareness that these are actually quite realistic scenarios? So, I know it's early, but it's a lot more fun if you interact with them.
Let me just put that slide up.
I like the pictures. I want to make sure that we can shoot it since we're in Sacramento. Okay, so look, to net it out, operational technology is way behind general IT. It's catching up. You have to really give some thought to going through a serious risk assessment of the environment, especially where there's connectivity. There are things you can do, like not having tight connectivity between the IT side and the OT side. If you look at environments like lotteries will airwall off the lottery side of the house from the rest of IT of the lottery commissions. You can do the same type of thing. There are solutions out there that allow you to have some device and either operate on this side or operate on that side. In one analysis in 2012, there are 155 vulnerabilities that were identified across 55 different vendors. I think that's low. I think it's probably quite a few more. Again, these systems were not designed with security in mind. And so we have to be thoughtful about how to wrap compensating controls around there and know what really needs to be protected. These attacks are the ones that worry me. I can get a new credit card. That's not a problem. When people can't get to hospitals and so forth, or water causes harm to people, that's a real concern. And so I didn't mention it, but the NIST cybersecurity framework is really designed, right? Critical infrastructure protection is a big part of that framework because there's a realization, Presidential Policy Directive 21, that we really need to focus on this particular area. And there is hope. Right. You can put a program in place and be thoughtful about where the limited dollars are invested to help mitigate that risk. And there's a lot of education to do. And I will tell you, I know that there's a little fear, uncertainty, and doubt in this content. I would not use this with a legislature, right? Or with a secretary necessarily, because I've found that it is much easier to get legislative appropriations by talking about mission enablement and making sure this is part of the conversation, but not the main part of the conversation. Because frankly, especially if it's a security professional, there's a reputation for being chicken little. There's never enough money. Rats are really scary. You know, yeah, we've heard this all before. There's not necessarily an appreciation for this because they haven't lived through it. We don't want them to. But if we can talk about how an investment to help mitigate risk here and improve mission delivery, it's a twofer, that works. And we're seeing good success with CIOs and business leaders within agencies carrying that type of message forward. So being able to accomplish improvement in security posture with a very proactive message instead of if you don't do this, really bad things can and probably will happen. Right, so that message is just sort of falling. Okay.
All right, I think I'm just about close to time. I'll give you about 6 minutes back. I'll be glad to stay and talk about this all day long. It's a mission that matters for me. So I appreciate your time this morning. Feedback is welcome. And again, 319 to hear more from the FireEye folks, okay? Great, thank you.